Joe Rogan just dropped a massive reality check on Conor McGregor's high-stakes return, and it completely changes the entire equation. We all remember the legendary version of Mystic Mac, the kid who was obsessively mirroring Jose Aldo's exact footwork backstage, walked out there, and delivered that world-shattering 13-second touch of death left hand. That prime Conor was a certified first-round executioner, possessing terrifying speed, explosive power, and surgical timing that made him one of the most dangerous human beings alive. He was simply that good. But it leaves everyone wondering exactly how he is going to look coming back from that devastating leg break. Check out how he was actively practicing, breaking down exactly how Aldo moves, and then immediately countering it with his own signature movement patterns. Boom. That right there is peak martial arts genius. That is precisely why this upcoming July blockbuster showdown is going to be absolute bananas. Pure chaos. I mean, the entire combat sports world is going to lose their minds for the return of McGregor simply because his magnetic personality is completely unmatched. But let's be completely realistic here. Do not expect to witness that identical version of him. You literally cannot. The man has not stepped into the cage to fight in 5 long years, right? It has been half a decade. And that inactivity is where the massive problem lies. Honestly, it might be even longer, because people tend to overlook the timeline. I think it is actually a bit over 5 years. It is creeping up on almost 6. Yeah, it might hit a full 6 years by the time they walk out to fight. Actually, it is 5. Let's agree it is exactly 5 years right now. So, what are we genuinely expecting to witness here? Are we getting a version of Conor that looked sluggish, kind of like Nate Diaz did in his last performance? Or are we expecting to see a vastly improved Conor compared to that version of Nate? Because let's be completely honest, Nate did not look great at all. No, he didn't. But you know who did look phenomenal? Mike Perry. Mike Perry looked like an absolute, certified murderer inside the ring. Literally a cold-blooded savage. When you examine the historical data of the sport, whenever you take an aging, inactive veteran, which Nate undeniably is right now, and put them in this position, it rarely ends well. Think back to July 5 years ago. It literally marks a 6-year gap. Or wait, no, it will be 5 years. Exactly 5 years. When you take a highly active, elite fighter and match them up against an old dog, it historically ends terribly for the old dog. Now, the counterargument here is that Max Holloway isn't actually that much younger than Conor on paper. He really isn't. But here is the critical difference. Max has been constantly drowning himself in ultra-high-level competition this entire time without a single break. He just won the iconic BMF championship, went to absolute war and beat Dustin Poirier, and has sustained that elite-tier active momentum. That right there changes the entire equation. I honestly believe that competing at 155 pounds is structurally the absolute best thing for his career path, but he is completely bypassing 155 for this specific matchup. This spot is locked in at 170 pounds. But yeah, realistically speaking, he might not even bother cutting any significant weight for this. Just 0 weight cut strain. He can literally just walk around comfortably at his natural weight. And understanding the massive scale of this high-profile matchup, it perfectly illustrates both his undeniable global drawing power and the promotion's heavy reliance on proven pay-per-view superstars during their biggest annual events. Even after a massive, prolonged absence away from the sport, McGregor still remains one of the very few elite athletes capable of generating massive mainstream sports interest far beyond the traditional core MMA audience. From a competitive standpoint, the ongoing debate around picking the right opponents perfectly highlights the promotion's delicate balancing act between high-stakes risk, raw entertainment value, and athletic legitimacy. Max Holloway has officially emerged as the absolute premier candidate for this slot. A high-profile rematch between these two carries immense narrative weight because their very first encounter took place all the way back in 2013, back when both young fighters were in the extremely early, developmental stages of their respective careers. Since that night, Holloway has evolved into one of the most technically flawless, refined strikers in the entire history of the sport, while McGregor scaled the absolute peak of global superstardom before ultimately stepping away from consistent, active competition. Nearly 13 years later, The prospects are now legends, and the weight class is completely different. Can the inactive icon overcome the nonstop momentum of the active BMF champion? While Holloway has developed into one of the most technically refined strikers in the sport, McGregor reached peak global fame before completely stepping away from consistent competition. After what has felt like an absolute eternity away from the octagon, Conor McGregor looks completely locked in, hyper-focused, and ready for what might just be the single biggest challenge of his entire comeback journey, a high-stakes clash with Max Holloway. The pressure sitting on McGregor's shoulders right now is absolutely enormous. The entire combat sports world is watching, holding its breath, waiting to find out one critical thing. Can McGregor actually reclaim the legendary version of himself after all these years sitting on the sidelines? From the intense grind of his gym sessions to those brutal sparring rounds, one thing is crystal clear. McGregor is deeply driven, he is hungry, and he is out to prove he still belongs at the very top of this sport. But let's be real. We all automatically expect Conor to come back as the exact same guy. The same iconic Conor that knocked out Jose Aldo in seconds. Boom. But the truth is, this is an entirely different Conor. That past version was deeply in it. That Conor was living it every single day. He was training nonstop, constantly trying to improve his mobility, trying to optimize his speed, and trying to master everything. This is a completely different Conor. Meanwhile, Max Holloway never stopped training. We are guaranteed to see a vintage Max Holloway out there, but I don't know if we're ever going to see a vintage Conor McGregor again. Most people would automatically consider Max Holloway a fundamentally better and more durable striker than someone like Charles Oliveira, but it definitely did not look that way in that fight. Looking at this matchup objectively, is Max really that much better than Conor McGregor? Can he actually avoid getting badly stunned at some point over the course of 2 rounds when it has literally happened to him in every single fight for the past 2 years? Is it actually ridiculous to say Conor McGregor matches up incredibly well here based on a specific skill set? Let's be totally real. Max Holloway is absolutely not going to go out there and chase desperation takedowns against Conor McGregor. If anyone is going to secure a tactical takedown in this fight, it is significantly more likely to be Conor McGregor based on how their first encounter played out. It's an interesting angle to consider when looking at this matchup realistically. What are McGregor's known weaknesses? Calf kicks. But when have we ever seen Max Holloway systematically break someone down or sting them with heavy calf kicks? He's a lot more likely to throw high-volume body kicks, oblique kicks, and head kicks. That completely takes away the specific calf kick vulnerability from the Dustin Poirier loss that critics always bring up. And even then, that third Poirier fight wasn't a standard loss. It was a freak structural injury. Sure, Poirier was winning the first round, but we have absolutely no idea what would have happened if his leg didn't break. We don't actually know. Poirier probably would have won, but you could easily say the exact same thing about Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall. We don't actually know the definitive outcome. Striking for striking, Conor McGregor has more natural power, precision, and is beautifully suited for this exact matchup. Conor McGregor brings a distinctly dangerous skill set to the table. He is widely considered the more lethal striker with far more devastating one-shot knockout power, making him beautifully suited for this stylistic matchup. Joe Rogan, alongside a chorus of other elite UFC commentators, couldn't help but weigh in on this massive return to the cage, sharing a crucial insight that is really worth dissecting. Rogan pointed out that McGregor belongs to an incredibly rare, elite tier of special athletes in combat sports history who possess the unique power to draw massive mainstream attention from way beyond the hardcore MMA community. According to Rogan, the unique type of anticipation and electricity that naturally builds around a Conor McGregor fight week is completely unmatched across all of sports. It ultimately boils down to that magnetic, larger-than-life personality, paired with his uncanny, generational ability to hook casual fans who do not even regularly follow the sport. Rogan straight-up described the sheer level of hype surrounding this blockbuster comeback as completely bananas. And honestly, that single word captures the entire situation perfectly. The sky-high expectations riding on McGregor's return are staggering, especially after spending such a massive stretch of time completely away from active competition. But at the end of the day, This massive wave of attention is great for absolutely everybody involved. It is phenomenal for the athletes, and it is incredible for the overall growth of the sport. This is exactly what the fight game thrives on: more high-stakes competition and a massive influx of new eyeballs on the product. For casual viewers to tune in, it requires a household mainstream name, and this high-profile July showdown is going to deliver exactly that. The entire combat sports world is going to lose its mind for the return of McGregor simply because his presence is so massive. But Rogan also notes a harsh reality. Fans cannot realistically expect to see the exact same fighter from the past. You just can't. The man has not stepped up to compete inside the octagon in 5 long years. It has been half a decade, and that prolonged stretch of complete inactivity is precisely where the core problem lies. In fact, it might be even longer because people often miscalculate the timeline. It is actually a bit over 5 years, creeping up on nearly 6 full years by the time the cage door finally locks on fight night. Looking back at his legendary run, Rogan admitted he was profoundly impressed by the meticulous way McGregor prepared for his iconic title showdown against Jose Aldo. There is fascinating archival footage showing McGregor deeply studying Aldo's specific patterns, breaking down his defensive openings, replicating his exact movements, and repeatedly drilling that precise counter-straight left hand that would ultimately land as the definitive, fight-ending blow. That hyper-focused level of mental preparation is legendary. On top of that psychological edge, Rogan highly praised McGregor's pristine offensive execution, particularly in that dangerous first round where he consistently put on an absolute clinic of blinding speed and pinpoint accurate punching. It was a terrifyingly elite skill set that easily solidified him as one of the most dangerous, formidable forces anyone in UFC history could ever face. Particularly in that opening round, Conor is just a different breed, incredibly explosive, blindingly fast, and possessing timing that is completely dialed in. He steps in with that notorious touch of death, leveraging massive hands to launch absolute missiles at people early on. It made him undeniably one of the most dangerous human beings alive. He was just that phenomenal, which makes it fascinating to wonder how he will actually look navigating a comeback after that devastating leg snap. The tape shows it all, highlighting the mental genius of him actively mirroring Jose Aldo's exact footwork patterns backstage just to seamlessly transition into his own lethal counters. Joe Rogan didn't just stop there, either. He dove deep into the specific structural elements that made McGregor an absolute nightmare to deal with back during his legendary run in the featherweight division. One major factor he zeroed in on was the brutal, borderline superhuman challenge of cutting down to that 145-pound limit. If you look back at the archival footage from those early weigh-ins, McGregor looked absolutely skeletal, completely drained and hollowed out, showing the extreme physical toll it took just to hit the mark on the scales. Yet, despite that grueling, exhausting struggle, he consistently went out there and delivered jaw-dropping masterpieces inside the cage. The sheer mental fortitude required to cut that deep to 145 pounds was insane. It offered a massive physical advantage in the cage, but it came at a terrifying cost to his kidneys, internal organs, and long-term chin durability, though he heavily benefited from utilizing rehydration IVs back in those days. Shifting gears into the actual tactical predictions, the stylistic breakdowns get incredibly interesting. Analysts heavily favor the direct counter-striking advantages McGregor holds over Max Holloway. The core argument highlights that Holloway's high-volume boxing and love for throwing extended combinations could play right into Conor's signature counter-traps. Specifically, McGregor's sniper straight left, sharp uppercuts, and stabbing body kicks are the perfect weapons to completely disrupt Holloway's rhythmic volume. A crucial technical detail to watch is Holloway's tendency to advance in straight geometric lines during heavy exchanges. That habit creates beautiful, clear openings for clean counter-strikes, especially in the early rounds when reaction times are at their absolute sharpest. The data proves McGregor is at his most lethal within the first 8 to 10 minutes of a fight. That opening window is where his speed, spatial awareness, and counter-striking capabilities all peak simultaneously. While Holloway is mathematically proven to grow far more effective in the later rounds due to his relentless pacing and legendary cardio engine, the early phase remains the ultimate deciding factor. That opening phase is what ultimately decides this entire equation. A single, perfectly placed clean strike from McGregor inside that critical window could easily secure a devastating knockdown or a clean knockout, completely flipping the entire momentum of the fight in his favor. Setting the stage even further, Ariel Helwani reminded the community that he had been calling this exact matchup between McGregor and Holloway for weeks. Helwani seemed genuinely confident that this blockbuster deal would materialize, laying out several compelling reasons why. For starters, this bout locks two of the absolute biggest names in combat sports history inside the same cage, serving as a highly anticipated rematch of their original 2013 undercard encounter. On top of that built-in history, it instantly reignites a major competitive rivalry between two elite athletes. When analyzing McGregor specifically, Ariel expressed a highly optimistic outlook regarding the former double champion's return, calling it phenomenal news for the industry and emphasizing that fans have been desperately waiting on this comeback for ages. He noted that McGregor appears intensely motivated and has put in all the grueling gym work required to step back into the fire. But crucially, he didn't shy away from the massive cloud of skepticism and uncertainty still hanging over such a prolonged, multi-year layoff. That is when Coach Tim Welch jumped into the conversation with a direct head-to-head comparison analyzing exactly where both fighters stand regarding recent activity and momentum. Welch shined a massive spotlight on Holloway's consistent presence in elite, high-stakes matchups. He walked through Holloway's recent murderer's row of opponents and elite performances, mapping out the wins, the losses, and the wars against top-tier competition to show just how busy and active the Hawaiian has been. It stands in stark, terrifying contrast to McGregor's long stretch of complete inactivity. Welch's central argument ultimately came down to one critical sporting distinction: sustained competitive activity versus severe ring rust. Holloway has quite literally stayed inside the fire, constantly trading leather with top-5 contenders and keeping his operational sharpness razor-honed. McGregor, by contrast, has been gone from active combat for years. And while Welch expressed genuine excitement for the spectacle of the return, he quickly pivoted straight to his core tactical concerns, questioning whether a competitive break that massive will completely wreck McGregor's timing, reflexes, and structural durability. He also brought up the opening betting lines and the surrounding hype, highlighting that Holloway is currently sitting as a heavy betting favorite, with McGregor cast in the rare role of the underdog. He noted McGregor's early psychological warfare and trash talk lines, like promising to completely sun his opponent, contrasted against Holloway's cool, completely unbothered response, flatly refusing to be disrespected. The analytical conversation then shifted to the monumental fact that this bout is officially booked at 170 pounds, a detail Welch considers absolutely paramount. He openly questioned McGregor's tactical decision to come back from a half-decade layoff and immediately jump headfirst into a grueling, 5-round main event against someone as durable, relentless, and battle-tested as Max Holloway, suggesting it is just about the furthest thing from an ideal comeback scenario. That is when legendary boxing analyst Teddy Atlas stepped in, offering deep psychological insight into why McGregor might still genuinely believe this is a highly winnable fight. Atlas pointed directly to the potential size discrepancy, arguing that McGregor will likely look considerably bigger, denser, and physically stronger than Holloway at welterweight. Holloway has historically been celebrated far more for his insane toughness, technical depth, and elite striking volume than for raw, crushing physical strength. Because of that, Atlas suggested McGregor is likely banking heavily on a massive size edge to help offset the undeniable rust from his years on the sidelines. But there is one glaring issue Atlas kept hammering home repeatedly. What exactly does Conor McGregor have left to offer as an elite fighter? He admitted that Holloway isn't exactly a young prospect anymore either, but he made the point that Max's constant activity has kept his current skill level completely known, tested, and verified. With McGregor, there is simply no current baseline gauge for what he can actually do inside a cage. The definitive edge, in Atlas's view, firmly belongs to Holloway thanks to that nonstop activity, his ongoing martial arts evolution, and his consistent competition against active elite opponents. And while he fully acknowledged the Irishman's legendary status, the analyst kept circling right back to the reality of the situation. Despite fully acknowledging the Irishman's legendary status, Atlas kept circling right back to the harsh reality of that prolonged inactivity, the glamorous lifestyle outside the cage, and all the massive, lingering doubts surrounding this high-stakes comeback. Holloway, by direct contrast, stands there as the proven, ultra-active, and highly successful modern competitor. But here is the ultimate bottom line. No matter which analyst's prediction you happen to side with, this is shaping up to be one of the most significant, highly anticipated comeback moments the sports world has witnessed in over a decade. Conor McGregor still carries that undeniable, global star power, that completely unshakable confidence, and that frightening, one-shot knockout ability that originally rocketed him into becoming one of the biggest names in all of entertainment. And yet, on the exact opposite side of that cage, you've got Max Holloway, a man who is fiercely active, razor-sharp, and deeply battle-tested against some of the absolute toughest fighters on the entire planet. That stark contrast right there is exactly what makes this stylistic matchup so utterly compelling to watch unfold. Some people are absolutely convinced that McGregor can shock the world all over again and land another historic left hand, while others are just as certain that Holloway's relentless pace, suffocating pressure, and extensive 5-round championship experience will simply prove too much for the returning icon to overcome. But one single thing is for certain: either way, the entire combat sports world is going to be completely glued to their screens when these two legends finally step inside that cage.